Tropics Rainforest Restoration Program, being onboarded by us, Eco Markets Australia, as independent market administrator in partnership with and collaboration with Terrain NRM as the creator of the program. And what better day to do it than today, being International Day of International Day of Biological Diversity. So super exciting and fantastic timing. My name's Maree Adshead. I'm the CEO here at Eco Markets Australia, and today I'm joined by my fellow blue high-vis shirt-wearing colleague, Amy Basnett, our Head of Programs, and as well as Bob Spears, who's the Chair of our Technical Advisory Committee. Also joining us today is Bronwyn Robertson from Terrain NRM, Amber Kellett from Cassowary Coast Regional Council, they're one of our first program proponents, and Kath Moran, who's the lead author of the Rainforest Replanting Methodology and key contributor to the design of Cassowary Credits. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks everyone for your attendance as well. I can see lots of you are popping through. May I first begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of country right throughout Australia and acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters and community, and pay our respects to the people, the cultures and elders past and present. We've got a very big agenda today, lots of rich content to get through, and we'll have some presentations up front followed by a Q&A. I'll come to that in 2 seconds. The first speaker is going to be Amy Basnett, my colleague, Head of Programs at Eco Markets Australia. She's going to be introducing our role. What does a market administrator do? Give a bit of an overview around that and how that high integrity market works. She's also going to be talking about stacking Cassowary credits on existing carbon projects where carbon ACCUs are being generated, and give a step-by-step guide through that. This is an Australian first. Cassowary Coast Regional Council, not sure if you knew how history-making you're being with all of this, being the first stacked environmental ACCU project in the country, possibly the world. Amy's going to step through that and explain that in a little bit more detail. Then you're going to hear from Bob Spears. Bob's the chair of our Technical Advisory Committee, which plays a really critical role in upholding integrity in the market, in the credits that were issued, and he's going to explain a bit more about that and how that gives that scientific robustness, the rigour involved in getting these sorts of programs up and running, so that those of you who are generating credits, those of you who are buying credits, can trust them and have that credibility and that value in the credits. Then over to Bronwyn Robertson, who's the project leader at Terrain NRM, Bronwyn's going to speak about the work that they've done in developing the standard for Cassowary credits and how that supports measurable biodiversity outcomes. She's also going to discuss the method, the first method that's being launched today to underpin the standard, and what it is and what it works and how to generate credits under that program. Amber Kellett from Sustainability, Amber Kellett, who is the Sustainability Education Officer from Cassowary Coast Regional Council. She's going to talk about that on-the-ground experience of going from concept to implementation, and speak to that live case study of that first project that's been registered on our registry today. Then we'll move to the Q&A panel session that I'm going to do my very best at facilitating amongst our experts, in which case we're going to bring Kath Moran into that conversation, being the expert and lead author behind the drafting of the program. We are expecting a lot of questions today. Use the Q&A function to put your question in, and I'm going to madly collate those as our speakers are presenting and make sure we can get to as many of those as we can. May run out of time, and if we do, please don't stop asking your questions. We'll put them all together and make sure we come back to you with answers so that you know exactly what it is that this is all about. That's enough from me. I'll see you back at the end. I'm going to hand over now to Amy Basnett, our Head of Programs. Over to you, Amy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much, Maree. Welcome, everybody. Obviously, Eco Markets Australia is absolutely exhilarated and so proud to be taking on the administration of this scheme, which includes I'll just go to the next slide, which includes our standard and our first methodology underneath that standard, the rainforest replanting method. So the standard itself covers projects that deliver benefits for rainforest in the wet tropics bioregion, arising from things such as restoration or reinstatement of rainforest biodiversity, or legal protection of rainforest biodiversity from impacts. From future impacts, or mitigation of threats to rainforest biodiversity. So as I said, we also have our first methodology approved under this standard, which is the rainforest replanting methodology. This includes the design and implementation of new planting activities that aim to increase the current extent of rainforest in the wet tropics bioregion through planting of stems or direct seeding on cleared or heavily modified land. And that's probably the important thing to take away from that particular methodology, is it is on cleared or heavily modified land. So EMA would also like to take this opportunity to welcome the development and submission of new methodologies under this Cassowary Credit standard. So if you know anyone who might be interested, or if you yourself are interested, please get in contact with us following the webinar. So all scheme documents are now available on the EMA website, with some supporting documents and forms in final development, but they will come on board in the following days to week. Well, it should be the following days, hopefully within the next week. So moving on, remembering to use my slides, I thought it'd be a good idea to start by providing some background on the wet tropics region. So the wet tropics is located in the northeast of Queensland, Australia, and is the oldest tropical rainforest on Earth. It is home to many ancient species found nowhere else, one of the most iconic being the southern cassowary, from which this program takes its name. The wet tropics is recognised as one of the most biodiverse regions in the world, and home to many ancient species found nowhere else, one of the most iconic, as I said, being the southern cassowary. So the rainforest supports extraordinary biodiversity, with half of Australia's bird species, a third of its mammals, and over 700 vertebrate species, all in less than 0.3% of Australia land area. It is one of the only places on Earth where two World Heritage Areas, land and sea, sit side by side, being the wet tropics rainforest and the Great Barrier Reef. This region has deep cultural significance and archaeological evidence suggesting that rainforest Aboriginal people have inhabited this area for at least 40,000 years, and is believed to be the only place in Australia where Aboriginal peoples permanently lived in a tropical rainforest environment. Eco Markets Australia. So, firstly, I'll move on to start now talking about who we are, and a bit of an overview of Eco Markets and the functions of the Secretariat. So as the head of programs, I have 2 project officers, and we provide that support to our Technical Advisory Committee and the bringing through the process itself. So Eco Markets was established in 2020 as a not-for-profit registered charity. We manage and administer voluntary nature markets, facilitating private investment in nature through maintaining the highest standards of integrity, governance and transparency to deliver real, measurable and independently verified environmental outcomes. Our inaugural nature market has been Reef Credits, which we have administered over the last 5 years. It's generated over 60,000 reef credits, which represents over 60,000 kilograms of dissolved inorganic nitrogen prevented from entering the Great Barrier Reef. This is something we're very proud of. So we have 4 methodologies under this program and have just registered our first gully restoration project, which is very exciting. As well as credits have been purchased by a mix of government and corporate buyers. And so the administration of Cassowary Credits is our first step to expanding our administration to a range of different nature markets. And we are working in the background on expanding this market over this coming year, so definitely watch this space. There's a lot of news coming through this year, and we're very excited to bring it all through to you. So introducing Eco Markets as the independent market administrator. Following board approval, we have been able to bring on board the Cassowary Credits Wet Tropics Rainforest Recovery Program. The Cassowary Credits is now recognised as a biodiversity credit market under our independent administration. What this means is that Eco Markets Australia now oversees all market functions, including project registration, monitoring, reporting, validation and the issuance of credits. We also manage the transfer, tracking and retirement of credits through the Eco Markets Registry, helping ensure transparency and integrity. So I'll walk you through that process shortly. But firstly, we'll talk about our integrity guardrails. So EMA aligns ourselves with global best practice to ensure that we administer markets in a way that ensures the highest standards of integrity, governance and transparency. Our integrity guardrails for all markets administered include transparency. Transparency is comprehensive and publicly available information on project design and credit issuance. It's provided and tracked through the Eco Markets Registry. Our independent validation and verification involves environmental outcomes subject to validation and verification, third-party entities ensuring objectivity and credibility. Our monitoring, reporting and verification process, this involves projects undergoing rigorous monitoring, reporting and verification of environmental outcomes utilising sound environmental scientific methods and transparent metrics. Independent credit issuance. So Eco Markets Australia operates independently from project development and management to issue credits to prevent double counting. Our registry uniquely identifies each credit, facilitating secure tracking and retirement. Additionality. All environmental outcomes that generate credits are additional. They would not have occurred without that program taking place. Durability. Each methodology outlines the durability period of projects and includes measures to manage or compensate for potential reversals. Leakage. Project proponents are required to demonstrate any potential leakage risks, ensuring activities do not displace negative impacts on biodiversity outside the project area, thereby upholding the intended positive outcomes. Just because these markets are voluntary and not currently regulated by government does not mean they are exempt from rigorous scrutiny. Each project and credit within these markets undergoes thorough validation and verification and must meet stringent requirements, ensuring outcomes are real, measurable, and achieved prior to any credit issuance. This rigorous process makes each credit a valuable and credible certificate of environmental impact. While some voluntary markets may face challenges with inconsistent practices and claims of greenwashing, EMA sets itself apart through its structure of independent governance and rigorous assurance requirements. This ensures every project and credit adheres to the highest standards. Moving on. So I just wanted to share this briefly with you all to just demonstrate the steps involved with our standard and methodology review and approval process. The Cassowary Credit Scheme had to go through this, and this is a process overseen by the Secretariat and demonstrates the level of rigour involved through the Technical Advisory Committee, public consultation and peer review process, followed by the final board approval. So who are the participants in this market? Project proponents, the person who is approved as having the legal right to carry out a project and who's responsible for managing the reporting of the project and its outcomes. This can be an environmental project developer who's entered an agreement with the landholder. Approved operators. Bronwyn will provide more detail about this later, but just to touch on this, these are approved by the Secretariat as meeting certain requirements under the standard, certified to meet requirements also in the methodologies, such as monitoring or preparing reports. The standard requests preferential involvement of approved operators who either identify as or employ Rainforest Aboriginal peoples. Independent verifiers, approved by the Secretariat to deliver independent verification services related to meeting the requirements of measuring and reporting activities and outcomes under the standard and methodology. Brokers. Project proponents may choose to use a broker to help sell their credits. All transactions, whether issuance, transfer or retirement, are recorded transparently on our registry, and this registry will be coming onto our website in the coming days. Credit buyers can be anyone who would like to contribute to the restoration and preservation of the wet tropics rainforest. So speaking of our registry, the Cassowary Credits registry will be made available, as I said, in the coming days. And we will also be registering our very first ACCU Stacked project, thanks to Amber and the Cassowary Coast Regional Council. So proponents must apply to the Secretariat to open a registry account and meet the minimum requirements for proponents in the standard. Anyone can open a registry account if they're an Australian resident or body corporate, comply with the applicable legislation, regulation or codes of conduct, and pass the fit and proper person test. The Secretariat is responsible for maintaining the registry. Things such as project registration, credit issuance, holding and transfer, retirement, recording transaction prices and supporting market transparency by sharing summary information and maintaining records. So talking about stacking, this is something that Eco Markets is very proud to be announcing as a first for Australia. And firstly, I'd like to thank the Clean Energy Regulator for their support in making this possible. So we are now able to stack biodiversity credits and carbon credits specifically, allowing landholders to generate cassowary credits alongside Australian carbon credit units on the same parcel of land, demonstrating the interoperability of the carbon and nature markets. This opens up a new and exciting opportunity for landholders. By undertaking complementary land management activities, they can generate 2 credits, one being carbon and one for biodiversity. These can be sold separately or bundled, offering a diversified income stream and greater recognition for the environmental outcomes they deliver. EMA and Terrain have worked closely with the Clean Energy Regulator through the development and assessment of the Cassowary Credits, credit standard, focusing on ensuring additionality requirements of both are met to allow for the ability to stack the projects. So as I said, the Cassowary Coast Regional Council will be the first stacked project and will be listed on our website in the coming days. And we're pleased to have secured the Clean Energy Regulator's endorsement for this stacking through an official letter. So thanks again to the Clean Energy Regulator. And lastly, stacked projects will be visible on both the ACCU registry and the Eco Markets registry, providing transparency and assurance for credit buyers. So safeguarding the integrity of both schemes has been central to this approach. Additionality has been a key focus through the development, and projects that are stacked will not impact the value of credits in either program. So because the project is first registered under the ACCU scheme, this affects how additionality is demonstrated through the Cassowary scheme. To meet these requirements, proponents must deliver and measure biodiversity benefits above and beyond those expected from the ACCU project alone, such as planting a greater density or diversity of native species. Outcomes from the ACCU project cannot be double counted in the Cassowary Credit project. Proponents must apply a counterfactual deduction as outlined in the Rainforest replanting methodology to account for the biodiversity benefit already delivered through the ACCU project. So how does stacking work? It's a transformative step that enables landholders to be rewarded for delivering both emissions reduction and nature repair on the same parcel of land, and gives credit buyers the option to support integrated holistic environmental outcomes. And this is a first for Australia. How does it work? Firstly, you register an ACCU project using the reforestation by environmental and mallee planting methodology under the Clean Energy Regulator's ACCU scheme. All eligibility requirements must be met, including newness and additionality. 2, you register the same project area under the Cassowary Credit scheme. The proponent registers the same project area under the Rainforest replanting methodology with EMA. Again, all eligibility requirements must be met, including additionality. 3, project activities can begin once approved. Proponents must ensure they meet the monitoring, reporting and delivery requirements for both schemes. And 4, credits are issued. ACCUs are calculated using FullCam, and Cassowary credits are calculated based on the additional biodiversity benefits delivered in accordance with the Rainforest replanting methodology. On the EMA website, you can download a guide for credit stacking for more information. And I will now hand over, with absolute pleasure, to Bob Spears, the Chair of the Eco Markets Australia Technical Advisory Committee. So thank you so much, everyone, for the hard work of getting this together and for today. So Bob, handing over to you.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks very much. And good day, everyone. Look, thanks very much for joining us. Bit of a threshold moment to see a scheme like this go live. And so what I'd just like to introduce the people that are on the Technical Advisory Committee. First of all, myself, I'm a retired public servant that's a senior public servant, spent the best part of half a century now working at the edge between science and policy. And so I've been chairing the Technical Advisory Committee since it was first set up. So on the committee, we've got Jane Waterhouse. Jane is an expert with long experience in reef water quality, particularly, and works with Trop Water and alternative private consultancy. Professor Dave Pannell. Dave's a resource economist at the University of Western Australia in Perth. And so he's a specialist in the agricultural thing, got a lot of background in soil carbon, but also in engagement of stakeholders in practice change. You've got Ian Prosser. Ian's a retired water specialist, CSIRO, well credentialed. Lynn's currently the General Manager of Agriculture and Horticulture Services in Department of Primary Industries in Queensland. And she's been a long-term practitioner as well with state of the environment and biodiversity work, as well as emissions accounting through from the early days. Got Kim Widak. Kim is a consultant that works. He's an economic and policy analyst, and so he's got a very good insight into the way in which the machinery works of markets. And Professor Michelle Burford. Michelle's with Australian Rivers Institute, Griffith University, and a specialist in freshwater ecology and freshwater systems. So the way we work, the groupers get together on a quarterly basis and review all the work that's happening. But when we're working with a particular project like the Cassowary Credits, we'll work with myself and two colleagues. So for Cassowary Credits, Lynn and Kim have been the subcommittee working with reef credits. So next slide, please. So what we do, we sort of work under the bonnet, eh? So the role of the Technical Advisory Committee is when a scheme comes in or a new methodology comes in, we have a good look at it. First of all, looking for any kind of red flags or threshold issues that need to be sorted. Is the data gathering going to be adequate? Is any modelling going to be properly supported? Those kinds of issues that we would look at it first of all, and then we work with the Secretariat then to identify suitable people for peer review. So suitable, well-respected practitioners in the field that can look at both the merits of the process, but also the way in which that market would work specifically. So when an application comes in from a methodology developer, they're required to offer a suggestion of 2 or 3 peer reviewers, but that doesn't limit the Technical Advisory Committee's capacity to identify people and approach them. So what we do is then we work, the peer reviewers will review the scheme or the methodology and come back with their reports, and the subcommittee will then go through that in detail, looking at the rigor of the thinking about methodology particularly, but the rigor of the methodology. How well is it built conceptually and practically in order to be able to deliver a real tangible result from a project. The critical thing is always that for a market to be trusted and to work well, is that the value has to be undeniable behind the credit which is put on the market and traded. Ultimately, what it is supporting a property right for a buyer to make an exclusive claim for a benefit that's been achieved. And so we're constantly focused on how the machinery behind a methodology or a scheme will generate confident, reliable, measurable results that will give confidence for anybody who's purchasing a credit. So will the scheme be feasible? You know, is it like little things like, you know, not so much little things, but, you know, where are the costs? How do things work? How do they stack up? And also, what's the actual effect of these projects? Is it the kind of outcome that we will get, such as we'll see with Cassowary Credits, where the improvement of habitat is real and valuable and highly desirable. So therefore, we're focused on the importance of the independence, integrity of these nature credit markets, making sure that when people buy a credit, that there's a real valuable benefit that's being claimed as a result of that purchase. So third slide, please, Amy. Okay, so it's worth looking at for people going through the scheme, but also going through the rainforest replanting methodology. There are some really good aspects of this methodology and the scheme generally that are worth drawing attention to. One is the rigor of the condition assessment and the development of the condition improvement units. Now, this is built on work that the Queensland Herbarium and others have been doing for decades through the condition assessment tools that have been generated. So when you look at the tools behind this methodology, it's built on the pedigree of that long-term established work to come up with valid units of improvement that can then be added, used to support credits. The other thing interesting about this scheme, another thing is that the approved operators for projects. So what this has done is it's actually established a system where a lot of the support for the outcome is who's doing it. And so there's robust machinery to make sure that the people that are actually conducting the works are well skilled and well credentialed to deliver it. So therefore their work is coming through prima facie as quality output to support a credit. The monitoring and assurance in the scheme has two different levels, but what it's built again on being able to replicate the actual change that's been achieved, and therefore create a dispassionate measure of the benefit. The conversion factor, what you'll see in this one is in the methodology and in the scheme generally. The conversion factor is established in relation to each particular methodology. So for a methodology like start from a greenfield site or a brownfield site and return it to fully functional rainforest habitat, that's a real effort. And so the way in which the conversion factors operate are to attach a higher conversion factor for higher real effort, and then to extend that into permanence. So what you'll see also in this scheme is that there's a 20% premium in the number of credits you get when you add to your project a lawfully enforceable arrangement for its permanence. So what you can see when you look at this scheme is that there's fundamental rigor being built into it, and there are some exciting aspects for the continuing emergence of the nature markets. So having said that, let me hand over to Bronwyn Robertson, who's done the heavy lifting on this from the early days in terrain for a more detailed oversight. Thanks.
Thanks very much, everybody from Eco Markets Australia and everybody joining us here today. My name's Bronwyn Robertson. I am here representing Terrain, but also representing the entire team across the country and the world who have contributed to the development of Cassowary Credits. So before I start, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country where I'm meeting you from today, the Tableland Yidinji up here in the Atherton Tablelands, plus all Rainforest Aboriginal people across the wet tropics, and extend that acknowledgement even further to traditional owners across Australia and I'd like to particularly acknowledge their ongoing connection to culture and country. For those of you who don't know Terrain, we are the Natural Resource Management Organisation for the beautiful Wet Tropics region up here in far northeastern Queensland. We're one of 54 natural resource management organisations across the country, and our role is to support and enable the community to be involved in initiatives that deliver good natural resource management outcomes, and hence I guess our involvement in developing Cassowary credits. Amy, you've touched beautifully on our region up here. It's a beautiful place to live. We're really proud to be living and working in the Wet Tropics region. It's incredibly biologically diverse and has incredibly deep cultural significance to traditional owners. And as you mentioned, Amy, one of the longest inhabited rainforest ecosystems in Australia. But it faces threats, unfortunately. There has been substantial clearing of forest historically, and some of that is still ongoing. We have endangered ecosystems and species, and there have been local extinctions. Unfortunately, there is still a declining trajectory of populations of many species. But despite that, we have a really solid foundation to build on and to turn that around, to enable us to turn that around. So in the Wet Tropics, we have a really skilled and knowledgeable restoration community, and we know based on previous experience and projects that we have got the potential for interventions and actions that can turn around that declining trajectory for biodiversity and support averting any extinctions or further declines. But to achieve what we need to for our region, we need increased investment. Over time, we've seen a decline in public funding for the environment, and unless we see some significant changes in that, the level of environmental funding that we have coming from the government is simply not sufficient to do what we need to do, and to do that in the timeframes that we need to do it in. So nature markets have been developing globally as a way to mobilise private funding to help fill that nature finance gap. So nature markets provide that framework that enables direct private investment, with that investment directly connected to genuine and measurable outcomes. Sec while I work the technology. Apologies. So in terms of designing Cassowary credits, we started off with these really two fundamental key criteria. Before we went into this, we wanted to know, first of all, if we did design a scheme, could we do something that would deliver good benefits for biodiversity, and could we build something that would deliver good benefits for our regional communities? And those two were connected and integral to everything and every decision that we made throughout the development of Cassowary credits. So we approached this initially, I guess, a little bit backwards. So instead of designing a market scheme that would benefit the environment, we flipped it around a little bit in the design, and we really looked at how we could design a community-based environmental scheme that would also work in a market system. And when it all came down to it, really being able to deliver genuine and real outcomes for biodiversity and for communities was that common factor that was going to make sure that this would be a successful scheme for all stakeholders. So for landholders involved in the supply side, and also investors buying credits. There were some existing markets, but they didn't quite meet the needs of our region or deliver those outcomes that we were looking for. We specifically needed something that was practical and feasible in tropical ecosystems, that would account for the region's high biodiversity values, and also in our region, the ability to recover and manage those values in modified systems. We needed to prioritise rapid improvements in biodiversity, because we're already seeing those declining trajectories for species and populations. And importantly, we needed a way to value and incorporate the skills and knowledge and experience of our regional restoration community, which includes a whole network of Aboriginal private government and community groups. So Cassowary credits excitingly, is now coming to fruition with our first real projects about to start. But a couple of key points, Bob and Amy, you've already touched on a couple of these details, so I won't go into a huge amount of detail, except to say that we have drawn on a lot of existing science and added to this with our own data from across, from plantings across the region, to make sure that we've built something that is really rigorous scientifically, but also really practical and fit for purpose and able to be implemented in our tropical ecosystems. It's a tailored design specifically for our region and for the tropical rainforest that we're working with here. And one thing that I sort of want to point out too is that there's targets included within the methodology based on some of that existing science from plantings that we've measured across the region, and they've been included as a way to prioritise and incentivise rapid improvements to biodiversity. Amy, you've already touched on stacking, but that's a really exciting feature of this and potentially a way to transition as we transition towards standalone biodiversity credit markets. It provides a way to really recognise and reward those integrated approaches to deliver both carbon and biodiversity outcomes. So in terms of how to do a project, this is a really brief summary and overview. There's a lot more detail available now in the scheme documents online, but essentially proponents start looking at the eligibility criteria, understanding that this first methodology is to support new planting activities of local native rainforest species in cleared land, and in those areas where the pre-cleared broad vegetation group is rainforest and scrubs. There's an application process that proponents work through that includes a project plan that outlines how they're going to establish and maintain their project, and a permanence plan which describes how they're going to ensure those outcomes and project deliverables are protected in the long term, and the incentives that are provided there for permanent protection. The replanting there's no specified techniques for doing the replanting, but what is required for all projects is that requirement to meet minimum standards for vegetation, indicators of vegetation condition. So proponents can use different techniques according to their site and the situation to establish and maintain their project, as long as they're able to demonstrate that they're meeting those minimum standards for vegetation condition. There's monitoring and reporting requirements. I guess the key thing here is that there's at least 5 field measurements required throughout the life of a project. There'll be 1 measurement taken of vegetation condition at the start of a project that establishes the baseline condition, and then another 4 checkpoints throughout the life of the project. Bob touched briefly on some of the verification requirements in the project. So our approach in Cassowary Credits was to provide the very highest level of integrity in terms and assurance in terms of the outcomes that are delivered by projects, but to really start that shift towards moving from external third-party auditing to a higher reliance on self-assurance that can be delivered within the region with the support of those independent approved operators. Credits are issued based on the improvement in vegetation condition over time, and as Bob mentioned, by applying a conversion factor that's relative to the methodology or the outcomes that are delivered. The way that credits are generated in a stacked project also take into account that counterfactual deduction, which has been touched on as well. So that quantified improvement in vegetation condition that might have happened through the carbon project is deducted in any of the calculations of Cassowary Credits. Bob has also touched on approved operators, and I think it's something that's worth reiterating again. It's a really critical component to make sure that our regional communities are engaged in the scheme and can benefit from projects, and it's a really important part of that independent assurance of project outcomes as well. So there is a requirement to use regional approved operators to deliver goods and services within the scheme, and to preferentially use rainforest Aboriginal suppliers. So approved operators will be certified by Ecomarkets Australia based on their ability to deliver those services and their presence within the region. a few different reasons there. Obviously, it's quite a critical component of the scheme. So in terms of the development of Cassowary credits over time, it has been a reasonable timeframe for the design and development of Cassowary credits. We are particularly excited to be here today as we move beyond the design phase and into the first stage of real projects. And I would very quickly like to take a moment to acknowledge all of the people who have contributed across those years to the development of Cassowary credits, and in particular, more recently now, the support of Eco Markets taking on an independent administration, and all of the authors who have contributed to the design of the documents, and in particular, Kath Moran, who's joining us later for questions, who's the lead author of the methodology. I will touch briefly on our first beta phase projects, which are now starting. On-ground work has started on some of those, and we're working with some really wonderful partners across the region. We're very grateful for their support as we work through this testing phase. It's really important that we have projects happening on the ground in the region for us to test the design of the scheme, but also to demonstrate across the life of a project how they roll out and how they're delivered for others who may be interested. So on that note, I am going to actually play a very short video if the technology works for me that describes a little bit more about one of our first beta phase projects, Cassowary Coast Regional Council, which is also being run as our first stacked carbon project. So I'll play the video and then I will very happily hand over to hear from Amber Kellett for a little bit more detail about the project.
Fantastic. So hello, as introduced, I'm Amber Kellett. I represent the Cassowary Coast Regional Council and I'm joining you today on Mamu country. So I'm going to briefly touch base a little bit what we've already spoken about, and that previous video really touched base on quite a few things, but I'm just going to run through our first-hand project experience, what it's like being on the ground, who we're involved with, and just the steps that we've gone through to get where we are. So as we can see here, we've got our project location is, again, on Maree Country in Nins Creek, is East Innisfail, just directly opposite the Moresby Range National Park. It comprises of a 1 hectare trial site on a broader 68 hectare property. So why council got involved? So we were interested in understanding the environmental market mechanisms, but found it was quite overwhelming when approached purely from a research perspective. And so we figured may as well learn by doing. So this is going to be a demonstration site to learn as we go. As we have mentioned previously, it's going to be a stacked project. So this initially started as a carbon project that then has developed into the opportunity to stack with the Cassowary Credits scheme. And this is going to be a case study for landholders that showcases environmental markets as an alternative income stream. And of course, we've got the environmental and economic outcomes. So it's going to directly support council's internal emissions by offsetting them, as well as providing an economic benefit to go back into the environment, whether it's in these projects or other restoration activities, with the provision to expand out from this 1 hectare block. So stacking the Australian carbon credit units with Cassowary credits. We do have 2 sites that we're operating. This is merely the Cassowary and carbon stacked project. Our other site is simply just carbon. But with this, we're going to be exploring the potential to stack with both just carbon sequestration and biodiversity incentives. We're supported through partnerships with the Maree Aboriginal Corporation and their Ranger program. We've also been partnering with the Innisfail State College, a local high school, internal council teams with the Natural Environment Sustainability team, which I'm a part of, and we've had a lot of help from our asset maintenance team, as well as the wonderful Terrain NRM and Eco Markets Australia. When it comes down to our project activities and community impact, it's a pretty large scale thing to take on. So to start, we've got our site preparation and activities. As you could see in that previous video, we were discussing how we needed to use drone technology, which was the first time council has used drone technology for weed spraying. Again, that was suggested by internal asset maintenance staff, which really moved the project along because of the location and the impact of the cattle on the ground. We weren't able to get a physical truck or trailer quad to be able to spray out the site that was all pond apple and invasive weed species. So we had our drone assisted weed spraying, and then we did slashing to level the surface, get rid of the invasive species and just really level out that land. When it comes to community engagement, we've directly contracted the Maree Rangers. We would like them to be from on ground to site surveys, biodiversity surveys and reporting. And then we're also acting as a model for landholders exploring sustainable land use outside of agriculture and farming. And then with educational integration, we are again partnering with the Innisfail State College, and we've got student engagement around what environmental markets are, what's biodiversity, what is carbon sequestration, and why it's so important in the region that we are. So we're with the Innisfail State students doing hands-on activities and learning all about these environmental management practices. So experiences as a project proponent, always starting with the challenges. It's been both overwhelming and extremely rewarding. It's been a very steep learning curve, just starting from land viability assessments, species selection and long-term planning. As mentioned previously, this is a 25-year program, but council in the stacking with the carbon credit units has committed to a 100-year permanency plan. So it is looking into that long-term funding, maintenance and navigating the responsibilities of reporting over this period. funding, while we can secure funding, you're wanting to ensure that you've got that ongoing maintenance and the complexity of the reporting requirements, as well as the basic things like dealing with the hot climate of FNQ weather. In this photo that Bronwyn and I are here, I went home and I got sunburnt through my shirt. It was that warm the day we did our biodiversity surveys. So it was hard work, but it paid off 100% tenfold. So the support received, exceptional support coming from Terrain. Bronwyn and I have worked quite closely together the last few months, and it's been a really fantastic experience getting to be hands-on, learning about the Cassowary credits on the paper and now actually getting it off the paper and on the ground. We've also had fantastic support from Eco Markets Australia. I have been calling them quite consistently and they always pick up within a couple of rings. So that support's been fantastic. Not to mention, we've also got the support from Maree Rangers with the consult for tree species selection on ground, site planning, maintenance, management, and the connection with the kids at the school. And that leads into the Innisfail State College, as well as internal staff at the Cassowary Coast Council. So we really do have quite a lot of anticipated benefits. Straight away, we've got our biodiversity. So as mentioned earlier, Nins Creek spot is located directly from the Moresby Range National Park. Every time I've been out on site, twice we've seen cassowaries on site, which has just been phenomenal. Rainforest kingfishers, crocodiles, sunbirds, everything and anything. I could spend far too long listing that off. So by increasing this biodiversity and nature corridor, it's going to support and strengthen the wildlife corridors between the national park and the surrounding areas, as well as just habitat restoration to strengthen and support the wildlife in the region. In regards to community, it's a fantastic opportunity to serve a visible local example of biodiversity and carbon restoration in action. It's really, the idea is to provide this as a demonstration site for landholders and community members to come out and see what it looks like on the ground and in person. And if they have any questions or concerns, they can come out and see it for themselves. And this is something that we really want to encourage in our region, as we do have quite a lot of land going fallow if landholders are no longer wanting to operate as farmers or agricultural operators. Then when it comes into economy, it's demonstrating a new viable income source that not only is profiting off the land, but it's supporting the ecological outcomes and strengthening the habitat restoration of the land that we're profiting on. Not only that, but it also opens potential career pathways in environmental restoration and land management that moves beyond on-ground work, but also into surveys, reporting, site assessments, and these kinds of things. I could spend a lot of time talking about the benefits, but I'm going to wrap up here so I can hand over to Maree for our Q&A session. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Amber. Oh, it's a pleasure to have you as part of this this launch, and thank you so much. Always great to hear directly from those who are on the ground doing these things. We've got some fantastic questions. I've been really impressed at the breadth and diversity of what we've got here. So the first one, there's a couple of common themes, so I'm going to try and theme those together where I can. There's some questions, not surprisingly, around additionality. So Kath, going to get you to warm up your thinking about this one, but it's really around that. You mentioned, well, not you, sorry, your colleague Bronwyn and my colleague Amy spoke about the counterfactual. So I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit more and just sort of explain that additionality around stacking a carbon project and how that counterfactual scenario with the Cassowary credit works. Thanks,
Yeah,
Kat.
sure. Thanks, Maree. So we've taken into account additionality a couple of different ways, and it includes looking at the potential increase in condition that could happen just through spontaneous regeneration. But I'm not going to go into that. That is in the methodology and also the explanatory documentation. But in terms of stacked carbon projects, so carbon plantings are for carbon, but they do have some biodiversity value. And we wanted to make sure that that biodiversity value wasn't being credited twice. And so the way we did that was to use the Cassowary credit approach to measuring condition in plantings for biodiversity, and applied that to the carbon planting that would meet the eligibility requirements for an environmental and mallee planting. And then we looked at, we could calculate then what is the increase in condition that arises through a carbon planting that meets those minimum requirements. And using our approach, the biodiversity value of those plantings that just meet the minimum requirements is not very high, but it is something, and it needs to be deducted from the amount that's claimed in a Cassowary credit project. So we've done that calculation using the data, and that needs to be applied to all Cassowary credit projects that are stacked to ensure that, so people can feel confident that they're not claiming that benefit twice. But just to reiterate, a carbon planting that just meets those minimum requirements doesn't necessarily deliver a lot of biodiversity value. A lot of carbon plantings might be more diverse or denser, facilitate natural regrowth and regeneration. Those are the plantings that will deliver a much more additional biodiversity value.
Great, thanks, Kath. I might just let you know, Amy, I've got one coming for you. This is pretty simple and hopefully quick one to answer. Can a landholder be a proponent and an approved operator, or do you have to engage that separately? You're on mute.
Yes, I'll get Bronwyn to also help with this one. To my understanding, a landholder can run their own project, but it's encouraged to utilise approved operators to undertake activities and provide that additional reporting. Bronwyn, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing that I'd add, Amy, is that a landholder can be a proponent and an approved operator, but if they're using an approved operator on their own project, they would need to engage an independent approved operator. So if they're doing, to meet all of the requirements in the scheme, they can't be the approved operator working on their own project because there's not that level of independence. So they could be an approved operator and support other projects happening in the region, just not do the work on their own project.
Thanks, Bronwyn. There's actually a heap more questions that have just come through. So what I'm going to suggest is we continue going for a couple minutes over, but what I'll do is collate the rest of the questions we don't get to, and we'll be making sure we publish those. So there's a quick one, Kath, I might throw to you. What's the unit of measure for a Cassowary credit? We've got a ton of carbon for an ACCU. What's a Cassowary credit look like?
So we came up with a condition improvement unit. So it's based on condition using vegetation as a surrogate. And we're so fortunate up here to have a long history of monitoring and research in the replanted rainforest as well as in intact rainforest systems. And so we were able to draw on a lot of data over decades in rainforest plantings, and we could then look at the change. We started with a very large set of indicators, and we whittled it down to a minimum but adequate set of indicators that show substantial change over the 25-year crediting period, and which often are linked with changes in several other indicators. But really importantly, the indicators we chose, which go into the calculation of condition improvement, have really strong links to the re-establishment of forest regeneration processes, because what we're really trying to achieve by the end of 25 years are systems that do not obviously look like mature rainforests. That would be impossible, but they have the potential for ongoing regeneration. So they have that natural regeneration momentum.
Great, thanks, Kath. Not surprising, we've had quite a few questions around that investment side and the cost of running these projects. So, Amber, given you've been speaking about the council's experience in running this and all of the work you've done in the lead up to this, what are you expecting in terms of the return on the cost that's been put into the project that you're running for the life of the project, in terms of what is it, not exactly in dollar terms, but the questions are around what's the cost of a typical project going to look like, and are the returns that you get from the ACCUs and from the Cassowary credits going to deliver a portion of recovery of that cost or greater? That's probably hard to say.
No, thank you so much. So for these specific projects, we are pretty limited because we're doing that 1 hectare minimal block. We've done it with that size so that it can be easily expandable out. So if somebody wants to know how much it might cost for 10 hectares or 100, you know, it's very easy to calculate. But at the site, because it is quite small, the cost of site prep, number of tree species, etc., would be lower than what you would have on something on a larger block or a larger site. However, with the returns for that, the number of ACCUs and the carbon credit units, Cassowary credit units that you'd receive are obviously lower than what you get if you expanded out. With the stacked project, I feel like we're going to 100% make a profit. If we were just looking at the economic incentive, with the carbon, because we do have the opportunity to, instead of sell them for an economic gain, we can retire them and internally offset our own emissions, whereas Cassowary credits, that is just an economic incentive, which we would like to have that funding come back in and reinvest to be able to expand out from that 1 hectare. It's difficult to put an exact economic benefit percentage on there, because we have been lucky enough to partner with the Innisfail State College and the Maree Rangers, and have a lot of hands-on work from people external to the organisation that are just interested in getting trees in the ground. So we do have also a volunteer base. But I would say that it was always going to be an increase from what you put into the ground, or the cost that you're putting into the project. The returns that you get, I believe, over the 25 years, definitely more than what you're putting in. So you will be receiving that benefit.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Amber. I'm doing my best to collate these because there's quite a few more coming through. And folks, I thought we might try and do 3 to 4 more questions before we wrap up, just to try and get through those. Bronwyn, there's a lot of questions around the investment piece. That's sort of what's motivating. And I know, Bronwyn, you've been having some early conversations with investors. What's motivating them? Is there a particular persona of investor that's that you've been experiencing interest from? And are they expressing interest in other benefits like social and cultural aspects that are being delivered by these projects? Is that something that's coming up in conversation?
Yeah, look, we've had some really good conversations with a whole range of investors, and they are all coming to us with slightly different reasons for wanting to invest. First and foremost, I think there is a level of caution around greenwashing. And so one of the attractive things about Cassowary credits is that it's able to really specifically quantify the environmental outcome, but also really explicitly be able to provide assurance that there are those social and other economic benefits to the regional communities. So that piece is something that investors are telling us they're finding really important to them and the decisions that they're making. And look, in terms of the reasons why they might want to purchase Cassowary credits, it varies depending on who we're talking to, but probably one of the key factors that investors are considering is being able to demonstrate that they're contributing to these positive outcomes. So potentially meeting their internal targets for ESG, environmental social governance, and being able to demonstrate that they're that they're meeting those targets and providing some good outcomes to biodiversity, but also to regional communities.
Great. Thanks very much, Bronwyn. This is a question around monitoring, and I'm thinking, Amy / Bob, this might be a good one for you guys. It's just around that, how the monitoring is occurring, what sort of, is there groupings of biodiversity outcomes that are being measured, frequency of monitoring and reporting, those sorts of questions. Amy, is that something I can give to you?
I think probably Bob or Catherine will probably be the best ones to respond to that.
Okay. Righto, Bob.
Right now, I've got torrential rain here at the mouth of the Macleay, so it might be Catherine might be better.
Okay. Yeah,
she
sure.
she hasn't got the backtrack.
Goodness,
No.
I thought this was going to be the easiest one, and it's the hot potato question. Right,
No, because it's very, very clear. Yeah.
Yeah. So monitoring is, so there's compulsory field monitoring that all projects need to undertake before the project starts to establish a baseline, and then every 5 years essentially, and it's to prove that the selected indicators of condition are meeting the targets. And those targets have been set using that body of research that I mentioned before. So we know it's realistic and attainable. It is, it's shooting high. We are in this scheme, we're really trying to incentivise a rapid restoration of rainforest values for biodiversity. And, but we know it can be done, and so that's what the monitoring is intended to validate.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. What stage are credits issued? I might stick with you, Kath, on that one.
Okay, so credits can, a proponent can claim credits anytime after the first 2 years of planting, and the team decided that the first 2 years in a planting quite risky, and we really wanted to ensure that that early time had been passed through and before credits were able to be issued. But when they're claimed, they can only be issued for condition improvement that has already been achieved. So there's no, it has to have already been delivered to be claimed and substantiated.
So just to add to that, sorry,
yeah,
the credits
Bronwyn,
can
so
then be claimed. So the credits can start being claimed from 2 years after planting, and they can continue to be claimed incrementally throughout the life of the project up to 25 years. So they'll be generated across the life of that project after the first 2 years.
There's some highly technical questions that are coming through that are absolutely fantastic. The depth of these questions is awesome. What we're going to do is collate those and publish answers as sort of Q&As on our website, because I think that's probably the best way to give full respect to those fantastic questions and make sure we're giving you the information you're really looking for. One common one, though, I'll just quickly finish on, is how does this relate to the Australian government's nature repair market? Well, we don't actually know is the short answer, to be completely honest with you all. We're going to wait and see, but we figured we'll just get on and do this. It's a different type of product. It's a credit in the true sense of the word rather than a certificate across the life of a project. As you just heard from Kath and Bronwyn, there's issuance periods and mimicking, well, not it's the same, but in the same way that crediting projects for carbon and other things work. So that is quite a significant difference. But I think we'll wait, it'll be yet to be seen exactly how they interconnect, and there might actually be opportunities for them to do so, which would be fantastic to see as well. Thank you very, very much to our presenters. You've done an absolutely stellar job of putting that information through as clearly and as logically, because it's a complex topic. So you've done really, really well. This is the presentation part is going to be kept as a recording on our YouTube account and on our website. So please, if you want to revisit it and relive all of this information or share it with colleagues and friends who you think are going to be interested, you're very welcome to do so. Really grateful for your attendance this afternoon. We've been absolutely delighted with the level of interest in this, and we're so excited at that level of interest as well, being International Biodiversity Day, and doing something like this to mark that occasion with an Australian first is really just so fantastic. Thanks to my crew, to Amy, Tom, who's done all the behind the scenes work. You've just been outstanding. Bob, you're the best chair of a technical advisory committee. There's been a few questions about process, which we'll put on the website there, and lots more information. But yeah, we've got a great bunch of questions, and I think we're off to a fantastic start. Amber, we wish you all the best with your project, and we will love to check in and share more information on how you're going. On that note, I will bid you all farewell, and we'll hope to get all this information out to you as soon as we can. Thanks, everyone.